Hey, I'm Blair Best. It's Tuesday here on The Story, and tonight, the Oregon pioneer atop the state capitol is getting a 23-karat gold leaf makeover. How much it'll cost and where that money's coming from. Plus, the man who pleaded guilty to murdering 4 University of Idaho students is being sentenced tomorrow, avoiding the death penalty with a plea deal. We look into the cost and controversy of capital punishment. But first, Oregon Governor Tina Kotek just called lawmakers back for a special session starting next month to try and fund transportation and avoid major layoffs at ODOT. It's our big story tonight. Well, after more than 3 weeks of speculation, Oregon lawmakers will return to the state capitol at the end of next month to come up with a way to try and fund the state's transportation agency. It's the second special session she's called in as many years. Last year for wildfire funding, this time for ODOT. We reported extensively on the lack of a funding plan during the regular session earlier this year, which prompted ODOT to send layoff notices to nearly 500 employees. Tonight, those layoffs are delayed until mid-September and will depend on if lawmakers can come to some sort of compromise next month. ODOT faces a roughly $350 million budget shortfall over the next 2 years. On the table in Salem was a $12 billion Democratic-led funding package. Republicans called it the largest tax hike in state history, and Democrats could not rally their party to vote together, so it failed. In the 11th hour, lawmakers even tried a sort of emergency backup bill to bridge ODOT to next year's legislative session. That failed too. The sticking points, and there were many, included raising the gas tax, launching a new pay-per-mile system for electric vehicles, increasing DMV fees, and hiking the existing privilege tax when buying new and used vehicles, among others. Lawmakers ended the session 2 days before they needed to in late June, and since then, cities across the state have already started to see the side effects from the lack of transportation funding. For example, homeless camp removals on ODOT property have slowed, along with graffiti, trash removals, and pothole repairs. Many city and county transportation departments that also depend on this state money were getting ready to lay off dozens of workers as well. The governor ordering state lawmakers to return to the Capitol Friday, August 29th, the Friday of Labor Day weekend, which we speculate is meant to put pressure on lawmakers to get something done that day or risk their holiday weekend plans, all in an effort to figure out how to pay for basic road maintenance and operations and to keep those hundreds of transportation workers employed. The governor said in a statement today, in part, "I have directed ODOT to postpone the start date of layoffs for an additional 45 days, allowing impacted staff more time to make contingency plans for their livelihoods and their families. I am confident," she says, "that lawmakers will step up next month to avert these layoffs by approving the necessary funding for the state's transportation needs." Now, tonight, we're also hearing from a union that represents many ODOT workers.
This delay is great. Like, this is the first battle, if you will, in the larger war here. It's nice to know that people seem to be listening because they're realizing, hey, the work that these people do is incredibly important and valuable, and we really can't afford to lose them.
We really do need legislators to show up for this special session and vote. And I think that, we know politics got in the way of the last transportation package, and we know that for the last couple of weeks, people have been trying to figure out how to move forward. I think from what I've heard from our members every day is that it feels like they are stuck in kind of like this political back and forth, and that we really need people to be focused on the problem at hand and how to solve it.
Earlier this afternoon, I caught up with the leader of House Republicans in Salem, Representative Christine Drazen.
We had 6 months in legislative session to work together and get that done, and we absolutely were very sincere in our willingness to work across the aisle. I believe that this should be a bipartisan solution and that there are ways to work together to solve this crisis, because I believe that we share the concern that we have to figure out how to fund these services.
The governor added in her statement, the special session will be focused on critical near-term solutions to stabilize basic functions at ODOT and local governments. This is just the first step of many that must be taken to meet our state's long-term transportation needs. But Representative Drazen believes this special session is not necessary.
We don't even need a special session for it. We have money in reserve as a state. We have money. It's sitting in what we call the emergency board. It's a joint committee of House and Senate members that have the authority to appropriate money outside of the legislative session. And we have enough money to cover costs related to these ODOT maintenance and preservation jobs that we so desperately need across our communities.
Tonight, Senate Republican leader Daniel Bonham released the following statement, saying in part, for decades, Governor Kotek and her party have prioritized spending on programs that line the pockets of special interests, such as costly housing initiatives that haven't delivered real results, while neglecting critical infrastructure needs. This mismanagement has directly contributed to the crisis we face today. I asked Representative Drazen if she was hopeful that Republicans and Democrats could come together this special session to reach a compromise. Listen.
Taxes are not the only solution right now. They just aren't. And so we continue to reach out. My conversation yesterday with the governor was to continue to encourage her to take a different path. And we will continue to reach out and encourage them to work with us. But so far, they have declined.
Not exactly encouraging, but time will tell. Today, I also tried to get in touch with two Democrats that were a driving force behind the original funding bill that failed, Representative Susan McLean and Senator Chris Gorsuch, to try and get an idea of how they might craft a compromise bill. Rep. McLean only told me she supports the special session, and I didn't hear back from Senator Gorsuch. Now, if state lawmakers don't come up with a funding solution for ODOT during the special session next month, then the first round of ODOT layoffs would likely occur, along with a second wave planned for early next year. Both together would constitute the largest layoff in the history of Oregon state government. I'm talking with Governor Kotek tomorrow morning about all of this, and we'll bring you that tomorrow night right here on The Story. But first, we want to hear from you. What would you want to ask the governor in regards to transportation funding? And what are your hopes for the special session? Let us know. Email us, thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave us a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Turning now to highlights from a KGW investigation into a mysterious shooting spree targeting traffic cameras. Last year, Portland police arrested a man for vandalizing more than a dozen cameras, the ones used to catch drivers running red lights and speeding. Officers arrested 28-year-old Chase Grialva. The former U.S. Army soldier and mechanic had no serious criminal record, just a few speeding tickets. Newly released evidence suggests the alleged shooter believed he was a martyr, fighting against the government one bullet at a time.
So we talked about that briefly, and then he made the comment, quote, "I bear that mark," unquote. And I took that to mean I bear the mark of being a martyr. He felt like these cameras throughout the city were essentially the government's way to rob the poor and give the money back to the government.
The suspect pleaded not guilty to 41 counts, including gun charges. Okay, Kyle Aboshi joins me now. Kyle, what got you looking into this?
It was such an odd case at the time. About a year ago, somebody was shooting out traffic cameras, about 17 cameras around the city over a 2-week period. It was really a mystery who was behind this. Portland police put out video and a description of a vehicle they were looking for. Finally, they made an arrest. But my question, what was driving this? And they didn't really explain at the time. You know, is this a disgruntled driver who's angry about getting a ticket? A neighbor, maybe something more radical? So that was the big question that was left unanswered.
What else did you end up finding?
Right, so we really took a close look at who this person was and what information was provided through court documents and such. This 28-year-old was in the U.S. Army, recently quit his job as a mechanic. Police interviewed him after his arrest, and at that time he talked a little bit more about what motivated this. He did describe himself as a martyr who was acting out against the government. What was really interesting is some of the evidence that police found in his vehicle, not only the gun, but also survival equipment, survival gear, maps, food items, also military camo netting to hide, also a medical kit for like trauma injuries. So it was really interesting what they discovered, including a notebook or a couple notebooks in his apartment rambling statements about the government.
So if he was arrested last summer, why is all this coming out now?
Right. So there was a preventative detention hearing in May, and that's where we really got access to all this evidence. I filed a public records request for the exhibits presented during that hearing. Also was able to access some search warrants in the case, and that really kind of detailed what information police had and what prosecutors are using to charge him and take him to trial potentially.
Okay, Kyle Aboshi, thanks so much. And if you'd like to watch Kyle's full investigation, you can find it right now on our TV app, KGW+. Download it for free on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. Well, tomorrow morning, an Idaho judge will sentence Brian Kohberger. He's the man who pleaded guilty to killing 4 college students in November 2022 at a home near the University of Idaho. He took a plea deal to avoid the death penalty in a months-long jury trial in exchange for spending the rest of his life in prison. It's rare for someone accused of murdering multiple people to get a plea deal, making tomorrow's sentencing an unusual court proceeding. Morgan Romero walks us through what we can expect.
At the hearing, prosecutors will explain to the judge why they think the sentence they're recommending is appropriate. Defense attorneys will have the opportunity to do the same. Kohberger can then give an allocution, a statement to the court where he could explain his actions and personal circumstances and potentially express remorse, something the public and family members have yet to hear.
Any victims of the crime, their families, can and will have the opportunity to make a statement in court to the judge, in front of the defendant.
This is where the hearing will be unpredictable. Victim impact statements, one of the only times in a judicial process where victims get to speak in court. Some read statements, some speak from the heart, some break down and can't speak at all.
It gives that victim the ability to have some sort of voice in the process. Sometimes it brings a sense of relief to get, the impact of this crime on them or their family off of their chest in front of the defendant. It also helps inform, I think, the judge as well as to the true impact of the crime. In this case, that impact is very clear.
It's unclear exactly when the victims will share their statements. It's up to the judge if that comes before or after the attorneys and potentially Kohberger address the court. Finally, Judge Hibbler will hand down Kohberger's sentence. Of note, the judge is not bound by the plea agreement and can order a different, lesser sentence. If Hibbler sentences Kohberger to life in prison as recommended, attorney Tara Malik says Kohberger would be transferred quickly from Ada County into the custody of the Idaho Department of Correction, where he would spend the rest of his days in prison, most likely in solitary confinement. Given how brutal the crimes were and Kohberger's history of social issues, attorneys tell me solitary is not only appropriate, it's necessary for his protection.
And we will be streaming the sentencing in its entirety on KGW+, starting at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Well, as we mentioned, Kohberger's plea deal means there's no chance he will face the death penalty. Some say that's for the best. Others think he should be put to death. Even the victims' families are split. It's been more than a decade since it happened in Idaho. Oregon has not executed a prisoner since 1997. And in Washington, it last happened in 2010. Now, it's still unclear why prosecutors took the death penalty off the table for Kohberger, a quadruple murderer with no clear motive or connection to his young victims. What we do know is the death penalty remains a controversial and costly punishment.
Death penalty is very expensive.
Robin Marr with the Death Penalty Information Center says along with saving victims' families from years of trauma and uncertainty, plea deals do, in fact, save taxpayers time and resources.
Every study that's been conducted has shown that it is more expensive to sentence someone to death and execute him than to incarcerate him for the rest of his natural life in a maximum security setting.
Why is the death penalty so much more expensive than life imprisonment?
Well, this is the most extreme sanction that we can impose on a human being. And so there are a lot of procedural safeguards that are involved in the process.
A DPI analysis shows most death penalty cases do not end up with someone actually being executed. Inmates sit on death row for years while their appeals play out. Judges often overturn their convictions or sentences. Idaho hasn't executed anyone in more than a decade. The Department of Correction tried to execute Idaho's longest-serving death row inmate Thomas Creech last year, but staff couldn't insert an IV line into him. And now, a judge has halted his sentence. Although, this year, the U.S. as a whole did see an uptick in executions.
The more meaningful evaluation of whether people are supporting use of the death penalty now and want it to continue are when we look at jury sentences. And juries are increasingly saying no to the death penalty.
Last spring, in the same Idaho courthouse where Koberger has appeared, a jury said yes to the death penalty for Chad Daybell.
So pursuant to Idaho Code 192515, the court is directed that the defendant would be sentenced to death on those counts.
He was convicted of killing his first wife and two of his current wife's children. State prosecutors are also pursuing capital punishment in at least one other high-profile murder case. But if the death penalty isn't used for a man who brutally stabbed 4 college students to death, some question who the death penalty is meant for.
That's a great question. There is a lot of frustration sometimes when people see extreme crimes that don't end up in an expected death sentence, and other crimes that don't look like they merit a death sentence ending that way. It says something about how arbitrarily the death penalty is used, and that also creates a lot of public concern about its use.
Does this show that it's going to be unlikely that we're going to use it moving forward?
I don't think you can ever make that kind of prediction based on the outcome of a single case. What I think is really encouraging about the outcome here is that all the parties got together and made a good decision in the interests of everyone.
In total, there are currently 9 inmates on death row in Idaho. As of March, all executions are paused in the state as the Department of Corrections there renovates its execution chamber to accommodate Idaho's new main method of execution, the firing squad. Well, still ahead on the story, the gold statue on top of the Oregon Capitol is getting a new coat of gold this summer. It's not paint, and it comes with a hefty price tag. Where the money is coming from, and who the gold man is meant to represent. That's when the story returns. In Salem, the gold man on top of the state capitol is getting a makeover. It happens about every 20 or 30 years. The statue, which is 23 feet tall and weighs 17,000 pounds, is getting partially regilded with 11.5 ounces of 23-karat gold leaf this summer. The project will cost about $234,000 this time around. That includes the price of the planning, scaffolding, and labor. The gold leaf itself is around $9,000. The money, you may be wondering, is coming from the state's Capital Accessibility Maintenance and Security Project, which is also paying for the seismic retrofitting work at the Capitol. That work is expected to finish in August and will be open for tours again next summer. You also may be thinking, they don't have the money for a transportation budget, but they do have the money to give the statue a makeover. Well, the statue money was approved in 2020 as part of the master plan to upgrade the Capitol building. But who exactly is the Gold Man? And how did he get there? He's called the Oregon Pioneer. He's meant to represent Oregon's pioneer spirit. The statue was commissioned for the new state capitol building when it was rebuilt in 1938 following a fire. This is actually the third capitol building we've had. The Oregon Pioneer was designed and built by an artist in New Jersey. The statue was sculpted out of bronze and then loaded onto a steamship, sent through the Panama Canal, and on a train up to Salem. Back in 1938, we didn't have helicopters or modern cranes, and it took 3 days for workers to use ropes, pulleys, and a wooden crane to get him up to the top of the Capitol building, 140 feet high. Then he was wrapped in a cocoon while workers applied gold leaf all over him. He's had to be regilded in that gold leaf every 20 years or so, and it's a process that's getting expensive. It's usually funded by private donors. Back in the 80s, the regilding was funded by school kids who raised $37,000, mostly in dimes, to have it done. In 1993, an earthquake damaged the Capitol building, and the Gold Man came loose from his pedestal, but he wasn't damaged. Now, the cost of the regilding has gone up over time. The first time, in 1938, it cost about $1,200. That's about $27,000 when you adjust for inflation. In 1958, it cost $4,100. In 1984, it was $39,000, and that was the year school kids raised money to pay for it. And the last time it was regilded, it cost $65,000. Again, this year's project to spruce him up has a price tag of $234,000. From the Gold Man on top of the Capitol to the so-called Prince of Darkness, heavy metal legend Ozzy Osbourne died today, and we took a trip to the KGW vault to see if we could find any old coverage, considering he played several shows here in Portland through the years. That's next, when the story returns.
Yes, I am.
Well, by now you've likely seen that heavy metal icon Ozzy Osbourne has died. He first rose to fame as the frontman for Black Sabbath before going on to a successful solo career, and later fame as a reality TV star on the MTV show that followed his family life, The Osbournes. He announced in 2020 that he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease on social media. The British rocker's family said he died this morning, surrounded by his family. He was 76 years old. Ozzy's death comes just weeks after he performed with Black Sabbath in England in what was billed as his farewell show. And the Prince of Darkness certainly had fans here in the Northwest, especially in the 1980s. Take a look at this ticket stub from a show at Portland's Paramount Theater in July of 1981. The signature belongs to guitarist Randy Rhoads. We also took a trip to the KGW vault today to see if we could find anything Ozzy related, and stumbled on a short clip from the summer of 1982. Well, this was the scene on June 17th that year, outside of what was then the Portland Memorial Coliseum, now the Veterans Memorial Coliseum. The show was part of Osbourne's Diary of a Madman tour.
Think it'll be worth it after you're all done?
Yes. Oh, this is the best. This is going to be, as soon as I see him, that'll be enough. But
well, Ozzy played several big hits that night, including Crazy Train, Iron Man, and Paranoid. Get this, according to his website, a few days before the Portland show in June 1982, he played up in Anchorage, Alaska, not in an arena, but inside the West Anchorage High School auditorium. That must have been quite the show. We know Portland has a music scene, so there's no doubt that many of you have memories, fond or otherwise, of Ozzy Osbourne. Share them with us. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave us a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Well, that's the end of our show, folks. Thanks so much for watching. The good stuff is coming your way next. And don't forget, everyone has a story to tell. Have a great Tuesday night. I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.